Chesam with Beis, we're going to start from the Mishnah on Ayin Chesam Adalef on the bottom. We're discussing the sizes of different objects, when they're considered something useful, and therefore if you take them out of Reshus HaYochid, you will be chayiv. So he's discussing many different objects. So the first object he discusses, Hameitzi Chevel, one who removes from the Reshus HaYochid a rope, a piece of a rope. So if it's Kedei Lasis Oizen Lakupa, if you can make a handle for a big basket to hold it with this piece of a rope, that's what a rope can be useful for, and that size is considered a useful size. Gemi, a soft weed. Kedei Lasis Tzalai, they would make a handle enough of a likvara. That's a much smaller size for a sieve. They would also make a handle, but they would make it from something soft, as we'll see soon. They wouldn't make it from a rope. And therefore, if you take out a soft plant, a soft weed, then the size is to make a handle for a sieve. Rabbi Yehuda though, I'm not sure if this is a smaller size or a larger size. He says, Kidei litel mimenu midas mino lakoton. If you want to have a shoe, so you usually go to the cobbler, to the shoemaker, and he measures your foot and he makes you a shoe. But if you have the first shoe for your child, we just started walking, and you can't really take him to the cobbler, so you take something at home, something soft, but something that will last, and you measure the foot and you cut it on both ends so you see the exact measurement. Then you bring it to the cobbler and they make the shoes for you. So they would use typically this soft wheat. So I guess he holds that this is something more common they would use it for. Is it small? Is it a smaller size than for the sieve? I'm not sure. I would imagine so. And therefore he says you have also a smaller usage, and therefore that's already considered something significant. Right? Niyar, typically we translate it as paper. In those days, they made it out of some sort of plants. They made a substitute for parchment. So usually they would use parchment, but sometimes they would use paper. It says that Rashi they would make it out of some types of grass. They would get like a receipt from the tax collector. They would pass by the bridge or wherever it is, and they would have to pay tax. So the one who was in charge of taking the tax would give them like a piece of paper and write a certain code to show that they already paid the tax. So if it's large enough to write that code, then this paper is useful. And if you carry the actual receipt from this tax collector, you're also chayiv. What does that mean? So Tosfos says it comes to tell us that even if this tax collector happened to use parchment, which parchment usually we have to have a larger size. That's usually what it's used for, something larger. But if you happen to write the receipt of this tax collector on a parchment, that's also useful. Or some say, I think the Ramban says, that it's coming to tell us that even after he gave you the receipt, you still keep it. Don't think it's just useful in order to write the receipt, and once you passed the security, then you're free, you just throw it away. Because as we'll see soon, you might want it again to show it to the next checkpoint, and therefore it's useful even after it was written. Niyar machuk, if you have paper that was already erased a few times and you cannot write on it, so it's useless to use as something that you write on, but they would still use it to cover a small bottle, a small jug. They want a shel palyotin of perfume. So they want to cover it. They didn't have any tinfoil. They didn't have any saran wrap, cling film, whatever you call it. They didn't have all the stuff. So they would have used paper. That's what they used to use to cover all these type of things. So if you have paper that's used out and you can't write on it anymore, so they would use it to cover the small bottles. Or leather. They would make like a pouch for this small writing that was a healing writing, had some sort of a lachash, something that you write over there that could heal. So they would put some sort of a pouch for it. So that's the smallest useful amount of leather that you could use. Duchsustus, some are great as this in the Mishnah, some say you have to erase this. But the chsustus is the inner part. They would, in those days when they would make parchment, they would take the hide and divide it into two. The inside part was called the chsustus, and the outside part was called the klaf. And the inside part is what was used for the mezuzah, and the outside part they would use for tefillin. And then sometimes they would make the whole hide into a parchment, and that was used for Sefer Torah. That's called a gvil. In today's day, it's all the same. They rub out from both sides a significant amount, and therefore it's called a klaf, so it could be used for tefillin. And for mezuzah, we say it's only a lechatchilah that you use the chsustus for mezuzah, and therefore you could use this klaf, you could use this parchment that we have today. So we have all the same parchment today for all three. But in those days, they would use different parts of the parchment. So the chsustus, if you have the inside part of the parchment, what is that meant for? The only thing it's useful for is a mezuzah, which there you write two parashiyos on one piece of parchment, Shema and V'hoyim Shemoya. Klaf, the outside part of the parchment, which is used for tefillin, so that even a smaller amount is useful, because in the Shorosh you have 4 small pieces of parchment, and Shema is a small parasha. So if it's enough size, large enough to write the Shema, then it's already a significant size. Klaf, the smallest parasha, Shema Yisrael. Fine. Dioi, if someone carries ink in the quill, and again, as we said, the quill is not counted because it's serving the ink, so we're looking at the ink now only. It has to be enough ink that he could write with that ink 2 letters, because 2 letters is something significant. Choil, makeup. To put makeup on one eye. Now, this is a bit puzzling, because if you put makeup on one eye, it looks odd. So the Gemara will discuss this later. The Gemara will discuss later, why would anyone put makeup on one eye? Fine. Devek, glue. We'll discuss it later. They would use glue mainly as a trap, to trap birds. So if you have to have enough glue to put on the place where you want the birds to sit down, to stand, and to get trapped. Zephes v'gofris, tar and, what do you call it? What you have at the tip of the matches. So I don't know how to pronounce it. Sophir says...
Sulfur.
Sulfur. Okay. So these 2 things, tar and sulfur, they would do to make a hole. They would want to have silver, I guess melted silver, they want to pour out in small quantities. They'd make a very small hole. They want to pour it out in very small, so they would cover the hole with either tar or sulfur, and then make a pinhole in that sealant, in that sealing, in that sulfur or tar, in order to pour out the silver in a very small, very thin line. It shouldn't come out so much at a time. Shaiva, beeswax. What's the smallest amount that's useful? Kedelitin, to put the amount that you could put alpin nekev cotton. If you have a small hole in a barrel of wine, then you want to clog that hole. So you clog it with beeswax. It's a sticky thing that could clog it. So that's the smallest useful thing that you do with beeswax. Charsis, crushed bricks that would mix with water, and they would make there's some sort of a clay. When they want to have, again, what is it called again? Remind me. Crucifer. When they want to have the crucifer for gold.
Not crucifer, crucible.
Crucible, I'm sorry. When I had the crucible for gold, okay. When I had the crucible for gold, they would have the special tool that they would blow the wind inside in order to form it and to melt it, to mapuach. It's like something which makes the wind go in, and they want to make it come in very, very tight. They don't want it to spread. The wind should spread. Should go in a very directed way. So they wanted to seal the hole and then push in this mapuach. What's the name for the mapuach? The blower.
A blower.
Okay. They
Bellows.
wanted to push in the blower very tight. Still
Bellows. Bellow.
What is it called?
Bellows. Bellow.
I don't know. I don't think it's
B-E-L-L-O-W.
B-L-L-O-W. Bellows. You want to push in the bellow, so you want to have it tight. So they put this thick clay around it and they'll push it in order that it should blow directly onto this gold in the right way.
the bellows. It's wrong. The bellows is what you bring the air in, but it has director like a small pipe. So the bellows you don't want to make small. You want to make the outlet of the bellows small.
Okay. So you want to push in the outlet of the bellow into this mapuach, into this crucible, and therefore you
No, not the crucible. Inside the coal. In order to the crucible is where you put the gold. Then you put it inside like a small oven, which you take a coal and you blow it, so it gets very high temperature.
Right.
For gold, it has to be 175 centigrade. If you want stainless steel, it's 1,150.
Right. So basically,
you
want to blow it in a very directed way onto the coals, and therefore you cover the opening for the coals with this thick cement, this thick clay made out of crushed bricks, and then you push it through, and therefore it has a right impact and makes the fire do the job. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, Kedei Lasis Pitput. Rabbi Yehuda says he wanted to fix this stand for this crucible. The stand was like a tripod. What do you call that? Tripod. To hold this crucible, and there was you wanted to stand very straight. So you have to smear it a bit with this thick clay made out of crushed bricks in order to hold it straight. So that's the amount you need to use, which I guess, I'm not sure if it's a bit less or a bit more, I'm not sure. Subin, bran, they would sometimes put it on the top of this crucible. So Rashi says they would use it sometimes instead of coals. And the Ritva says that they would put it inside and that would refine the gold somehow. They would put it to refine the gold. So that's the amount that they would use for bran to put it into this crucible. That's the amount that's significant. Fine. Seed, plaster. They would put the plaster on a small girl. What would that be? So Rashi said there was some places they wanted to remove the hair. How they remove the hair was putting plaster in it. They would leave plaster in it and that would make the hair remove wherever. Like different place they would want to put to remove the hair. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, Kedei Lasos. 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, the Gemara is going to explain these two things. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Kedei Lasos kalkol. Rabbi Nachemi Eimer Kedei Lasos undefi. The question is, where would they put this plaster? Which part of the hair would they want to remove? So there's two opinions that the Gemara will explain later. What are these two opinions? Where they would put the plaster in order to make sure that they remove the hair totally and they make it smooth by these daughters, by these girls.
By the way, seed is not plaster. It's they're totally different, and then it does have the effect of melting hair. Plaster is something totally different. Seed is where they used to make special oven, like they used to throw people inside it. Because when you mix it with water, it reacts and it creates acid.
Mm-hmm.
So this is seed. You use it to make plaster. Part of the consistency of plaster is seed.
Okay. Fine. So we went through all these different objects. What's the size first? And now we're going to go into Gemara and try to explain each one of these objects. The first chevel, a rope, it has to be the size of a handle of a basket. Now, a handle of a basket is larger than the handle of a sieve. So if you can make a handle of it, why is it not useful enough when you could use it as a handle for a sieve? It says the Gemara, chevel nami lechayev, let a person be chayev when he transferred a rope, if it's large enough to make a handle for a sieve. Says the Gemara, no. Kavan the chorik, since it scratches, it's thick and it scratches, bimona on a normal utensil, of the ancient people don't make a handle made out of rope. They make it out of something soft, out of a soft weed. However, on a basket, they can make a handle out of rope because there's nothing to scratch. It's a rough thing. Fine. Hutzin.
By the way, it's also stronger.
Okay.
Because it's
Hutzin,
big and it's heavy, so you have to have a stronger handle.
Right. Hutzin, palm leaves, lulav leaves. You'd make from it a handle for a basket. The sal kfifa mitzvahs, to a basket which is made out of lulav leaves, and that's what's called mitzvahs, because lulav leaves are called surei dekel. They're called, that's what the name of they're called the palm leaves. So they would use a handle from the same material, from palm leaves, and that's what it's meant for. Sieve, now what's the exact translation for sieve? It's something which grows around a palm tree, like a soft thing, and you can make thread out of it, you can make soft things out of it, out of this thing that grows around this palm tree. Someone could offer a translation, I don't know the exact translation. So what do you do with it? Acherim Aimrim, Rabbi Meir says, which was called Acherim, Kedeilitain alpi mashpich koton. You put it by the opening of a small funnel. Lisan and a sayayin.
It's a filter. Filter.
You want to filter the wine. They would use this material to make the strainer on the bottom, to make the strainer. So that's the smallest amount of making a strainer is by the opening of a funnel. That's very small opening. So that's the smallest amount which is useful from this material which grows around the palm tree. Fine. Revav, fats or oil. You want to smear it under a small cracker. When you put things in the oven till today, today they have all these parchment paper, whatever you call it, but the typical old way is you smear with oil in order that things shouldn't stick. So the smallest thing you would want to bake is a small cracker. And then under that you want to smear either oil, either fat, something that will make that it shouldn't stick. So that's the smallest useful amount of oil or any type of fat to smear it under this cracker. The kamishura, what's the smallest cracker? Kisela, the size of a coin of a sela. Says the Gemara of Atanya Kigrigeris. In another place it says that the size is like a dried fig. Says the Gemara, a dried fig is the size of the coin called sela. They both have the same size. And that is the size of this oil, how much is significant. Fine. Muchin, soft leftovers of fabric. They make a small ball out of it, a soft ball. They would play with it. I don't know what they would do with it. So that's the smallest useful thing, to make a small ball, a soft ball. The kamashuri, how large is a soft ball? Ke'ego is the size of a nut. I don't know what you could do with a soft ball the size of a nut, but somewhat they would do, make some sort of a ball the size of a nut, and that's what these soft leftovers of, like, comes off clothes, or things that you won't make anything out of it. You won't make any clothing out of it. You just want to gather these soft things and make something stuffed with a soft feeling, a soft filling from this fabric. So the smallest useful thing is a small ball. Fine. Okay. The next thing mentioned was niyar. Let's translate. That's paper. It has to be the size that you could write the receipt for the tax collector. Now, how large is that? Tana, we learned in a brayso. Kama kesher muchsin. What's the size of this receipt? Shtei yosi yishel kesher muchsin. The special size of letters, large letters that they would use, and that was like their code. They would write some sort of, I don't know what, Dalet Aleph or something, I don't know, whichever code they made. And it was a special size of letters. And that was the code that he paid the tax. So it was a special, so it's large enough they could write on it 2 large letters. Says the Gemara V'Raminu. We have a contradiction to this brayso. It says Amoitzi niyar cholok, one who takes out a blank paper. Im yesh bei kedei lichtov shtei yosi yis chayiv. Here it doesn't say 2 letters of kesher muchsin, 2 large letters. It sounds like we're talking about 2 letters, regular letters. So this is a much smaller size. It sounds like paper is useful if you could write the smallest, the regular size letters. Says the Gemara, no. Amar Rav Sheish, vim lav potter. Amar Rav Sheish is my shtei yosi, is the second brayso which says 2 letters. Shtei yosi shel kesher muchsin. It also means 2 large letters of which the tax collectors used to use. That's one answer. Rav Amar, no. Look at the wording of the second brayso. Kedei lichtov olav shtei oisiyos. It should be enough that you could write on it 2 letters. Usually, in order to write something in a small piece of paper, you have to put your hand down on it to hold it. So you have to have a bit of an extra space in order to hold the paper down and then to write the 2 letters. So my shtei yosi the dan, it can mean our 2 letters ubeis achiza and a space that you can hold it with. The hainu kesher muchsin, it adds up to the size of 2 letters of this receipt. This receipt, they would write it without holding it down. I guess they write it down while it's on their hand, and they would use out all the space on the paper. There's no empty space, and then the person also doesn't need to have anything to hold it with. He holds it in his hand like this, and he shows the receipt that he shows his ticket that he paid the tax.
They used to have a stamp which had the letter on it. Okay. So you don't have to hold it. You put it and you bang it.
Okay, makes sense. So basically there you don't need to have a place to hold it. And therefore it adds up to the same amount, the same size. 2 regular letters with a space to hold it. Or 2 moichsin letters which they don't have to hold it. Adds up to the same size. Right. Okay. Masonry. We're going to ask a question on Rava. Rava, which says that when the brayso says 2 letters, it means 2 small letters plus the amount to hold it, which adds up to kesher muchsin, which means that the reason why it's useful is because you could write a receipt for a tax collector. The Gemara, the brayso is just using a term that everyone will know, the regular 2 letters plus amount that you could hold it. So we're going to see a different brayso here, which talks about what if you have a used paper, but it has some empty space, which that empty space is useful because you can write something in that empty space. So the brayso says if you could write 2 letters in that empty space, then it's considered useful. Now, if we say that you have to be able to write what is considered useful, which 2 letters are useful, if it's for the tax collector's receipt, then it has to be that it has a space over here for the size of the tax collector's letters, because the rest is written on. So if Rav Sheish that says that when the brayso says 2 letters, it means 2 tax collector's letters, this brayso fits. Because when it says 2 letters, it means 2 tax collector's letters. But according to Rava, that the brayso, when it says 2 letters, it means regular letters. But you have to add the amount to hold it. And that will add it up to the tax collector's letters. Here, that it's a used paper, the empty space, you don't need to have any place to hold it in the empty space. So you have a place to hold it in the written part. And then the leftover will just be 2 letters, regular letters. So you can't write down any receipt for tax collectors on it. So then this brisa will be arguing on the brisa which says that you need to have the size for tax collectors. So this is a question on Rava. How can you say that the brisa, when it says 2 letters, it means regular letters, but you have to add the amount that you would hold it with? Here we see that you have extra amount to hold it with the written part, and it says that the empty space has to be 2 letters, and l'chayr it should have to be 2 letters of the tax collectors, but 2 letters according to Rava means regular letters. Let's see in the brisa. One who takes out a raised piece of paper, like we said in the brisa or in the Mishnah, and then in the brisa, I'm sorry, ushtar parua, and a used star. If the empty space has the amount to write 2 letters,
Parua is not used, mean that it's been fulfilled.
It's been paid off. We'll talk about that soon. We'll talk about that soon. Yeah, it's a document, a loan document that the person has already paid his loan. So there's 2 options that it can be useful for: either to cover your bottles, as we mentioned earlier, or to use it for a tax receipt. So it gives the 2 options. If the white part has the amount that you could write 2 letters, or the whole thing is large enough, you can put it in a small bottle of this perfume. So Bishlam Rav Sheishes, the Omer that he says, my Shtei Yosis, when the Brisa says plain 2 letters, what does it mean? Shtei Yosis or Kasher Muchsin, it means the large letters, sharper, it fits, because the Brisa is saying that it's useful for a receipt. El Rava Domer Shtei Yosis, it means regular letters, or Beis Achiza plus the part to hold it, the Hainu, which adds up to Kasher Muchsin, Hacha here, Beis Achiza Litzarich. I already have a place to hold it in the written part, so I don't have enough space in the empty part for a receipt, so that will contradict the other brisa. Kashi, we don't have an answer. Okay. Talmud Hamoitzi kasher muchsin. The next thing, which was mentioned in the Mishnah, if someone carries the written receipt, until you didn't show it to the tax collector to prove that you already paid, chayiv, because it's still useful. You want to show him that you paid. Once you have shown it to the tax collector, potter, because it's useless. Rabbi Yehuda no. Even after you showed it to the tax collector, you still chayiv. Why? You need it. Says Gemara, my beinayu is not a typical expression, but it means what's the difference between them? Which means what's the logic of the argument? Why does Rabbi Yehuda say you need it once you showed it? What do you need it for? The difference is the policeman that might stop him on the way and ask, 1 second, did you pay tax? So he has to show it to them as well. Rava says another example. Sometimes the one who's standing there is a smaller worker, a hired worker, which gives him this receipt. But then he wants to show it to the higher up that's waiting for him, let's say in the he's waiting for him. 1 second. 1 second. Okay. I'm not sure exactly. I didn't really understand what she's saying. 1 second. He says, in a case that there might be some smaller ranked people that will still ask you for this receipt, lower ranked people. So according to Tanakama, you could get away with just telling him a code or telling him who you paid and I'll let you go. Rabbi says, no, you have to have the actual receipt to show to all the officials that you're passing by, all the officers. You have to be able to show them this receipt. Rav Ashi Amar, a different reason. Chad moiches ika binayu. Even if you have only one person in charge and you showed him the receipt, you still want to keep it. Because if ever, in any time, someone comes and has kindness to you, you didn't pay the tax, look, I always pay my taxes. See the receipts. I can show you that I'm a person that always pays taxes. Gomer, he tells him, Chazi, look, I'm good with the tax collectors. I always pay. Don't come and tell me I didn't pay. Look, I have all my receipts. So not only, I'm not just keeping it to show that this particular toll I have paid, it's just to show that I'm a person that pays tax. So that's why, according to Rabbi, it's useful to keep it even after you paid. Okay, let's see if we can continue a bit. Let's see. Let's just one more piece. We're discussing a paid loan, a document of a paid loan. So let's see. Tanu Rabbanan. We mentioned that earlier, that one could keep it in order to cover his jug. One could keep it in order to use in the empty space to write this receipt for the tax collector. But we'll see here there's a machlokes if you're allowed to keep a paid document. Because you might come to ask for it again, and therefore maybe you must destroy any paid loans, any documents of paid loans you must destroy. Tanu Rabbanan. One who removes from Rishus HaYachid a document of a loan. Actually, part if he hasn't paid it, chayiv. Misha part if he paid it already, potter. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer af misha part chayiv. Even after he paid it, he's still chayiv. Nisha tzarech you still need it. My binai. What's the logic of their argument? Here, the logic is not if you need it. Obviously, you could use it. You could use it to cover a job. Amar Rav Yosef. Also, lashes star parua. It could be now. The question is, am I allowed to keep a document of a paid loan? Rabbanan Sabri also lashes star parua. You may not keep it. You must destroy it. Rabbi Yehuda Sabri mutar lashes star parua. You're allowed to keep it. Fine. That's one explanation. Abai Yomer, no, the Kuliyama also lashes star parua. Everyone says you're not allowed to. You must destroy it. The machlokes is different. Usually, when you have a document with two witnesses, you have to have someone testifying that those witnesses are valid. It's not forged. And until that happens, then the lender, the so-called lender, could say, never happened, this is a forgery. Now, what if the lender himself said, yes, it's true. It's accurate. It's not forged. But I paid it. Can we say, if it paid it, why is it still in the hands of the lender? And then he still has to pay.
The borrower paid it.
Yeah. Can the borrower say, can the Beis Din say, if the borrower would have paid, how is the lender still holding it? And therefore, no, you have to pay? Or we say no. Since he is the one that validated the shtar, if he says he paid, we have to trust him. So we'll translate this thing a bit differently. It doesn't mean that the person actually paid. It means the person claimed he paid. So Rabbanan say if he claimed he paid, it's useless. You can't do anything with it. Everybody says no. Even if he claimed he paid, he could still use it. Because if he said it's a valid shtar, he can't say he paid. Says the Gemara, if the borrower admits that he wrote the shtar, that it's a valid shtar, do I need other Adam to validate it in order to collect the money, even if the borrower says he paid? Or could I just say, no, once you said the shtar is valid, you cannot say you paid? If he's the one who says it's valid, if he didn't say, if he says he paid, we have to trust him. Once you say it's valid, that's it. You cannot say you paid. Actually pare? What does the Braisa mean when it says you paid or you didn't pay? It means if he says he paid or he didn't pay. Okay, we'll come to the next answer tomorrow. So let's summarize what we said today. We went through a bunch of different objects. What's the size that's useful? So the first two examples were a thick rope that you could use as a handle for a basket, or a soft weed which you can use as a handle for a sieve, which is obviously much smaller. Why wouldn't you use a rope for a sieve? Because it will scratch it. And then we added oil or fats, the amount that you would put under a cracker to bake. And any soft bits and pieces of fabric, you would make a small ball the size of a nut. A cracker that you would bake is the size of a coin that's a seller, which is the size of a dried fig. Then we spoke about paper. Paper is the size of this receipt of the tax collectors, which is 2 large letters. There's one brayso which says 2 letters. So either it means 2 large letters, or it means 2 regular letters and the part that you can hold it. And by the tax collectors, they didn't have the part to hold it, and therefore it matches to the same size. Then there's another brayso which says that if you take out an erased piece of paper or a written document which is already paid, so if you have an empty space the size of 2 letters, and it's already useful. So this fits more with the first explanation, of Shesh's explanation, that 2 letters mean 2 large letters. Because if 2 letters mean 2 small letters, here you cannot add the part to hold, because you could hold the part that you cannot write on, the part that's written on, and then you'd just be left with 2 small letters, and it won't add up to the 2 letters of the tax collectors. That's why this brayso fits more with the first explanation of Shesh's explanation. Then the actual receipt, till when is it useful? So Tanakama says till he showed it to the tax collector. He says no, later also. Why? Either for the police, or if they show it to another official, or just to keep it in your records, to show it for the future. If they want to tell you don't pay taxes, here, look, I pay taxes. You keep it for your records. Then we spoke about in the brayso, what if someone carries a paid document, a loan document that was already paid? Tanakama says you potter, and Rabbi says you chayiv. So the first explanation was, Tanakama says you're not allowed to keep a paid document, you have to destroy it. Rabbi says you're allowed to. And therefore I could use it to cover a jug. Yeah? The second explanation is no, we're talking about a document which no one recognizes the signature of the witnesses. So the borrower could have said it was forged, but he said, no, it's true, but I paid. So the question is, since he's the one that validated the shtar, could we trust him that he paid? Rabbanan say yes, and therefore it's useless. Maybe this is no, and therefore it's still useful, therefore he's still chayiv. Then we'll have one more explanation with Hashem tomorrow.